This is Evan, the freelance MVP. You might have seen him on a billboard in Times Square. Reason being, he's a freelancer who's made over 1.75 million on Upwork alone. A single 1-hour meeting with him cost $1,000 US. Now, naturally, since we run the Freelance Developer Bootcamp, I had to reach out to Evan to see if he was up to share his secrets to success. So in this video, I tried to ask Evan the most interesting questions I can think of about his freelancing career. So in other words, if you've ever been even remotely interested in freelancing, whether as a programmer or just in general, then this is the video for you. We're going to cover everything from getting your first client to building confidence, common mistakes when it comes to invoicing, communication, and the biggest problem clients that Evan has ever dealt with. If you want to go deeper, we also decided to shoot a mini series called 7-Figure Freelancing Secrets, which is included when you join our program Freemote, the Freelance Developer Bootcamp. And if you're an existing Freemote member, you're given access to this for free. We just launched it. And once again, it goes deeper on everything we discuss here, and it's a must-have if you want to replicate Evan's results. With that said, let's get into it. So Evan, do you care to briefly introduce yourself?
I'm Evan Fisher. I've been a freelancer for about 5 years. I've been Upwork's highest earning freelancer worldwide as individual freelancers go. All
right, yeah. So excited to be talking to you today, and let's get right into it. So a lot of my audience is programmers, and of course what's going to be on people's minds is your advice going to apply to them? Because you personally, you're not a programmer, and then beyond that, what do you think of the programming niche?
Yeah, I'm not a programmer, but I literally wish that I was, because the programming and web development niche is absolutely tremendous. So to put it in perspective, on Upwork, freelancers in total are earning roughly $4 billion a year, and over 25% of all jobs on Upwork are in the programming and web development niche, including some of the highest paying jobs on Upwork. So doing the math, this is at absolute minimum a $1 billion a year category on Upwork. So yeah, I wish that I was a programmer, but think of Upwork as a system. In programming, you could literally code everything from scratch, or you could use the tools, tips, tricks, and existing strategies to get your job done faster and more efficiently, right? So let's say like I want a Shopify website so that I can sell footballs, and I'll give you $50,000 to do it. And what are you going to do? Are you going to code everything by hand, manually in HTML or CSS? No, of course not. You're going to make mistakes. You'd have to debug, and it'd take you forever. Same thing goes with Upwork. There are tips, tricks, and strategies that help you get earning faster, that transcend all niches, all countries, all categories. And so, yeah, it applies across the board.
I got you. So programming, not so bad at all. Anyway, those numbers that we threw out earlier, I'm sure those are going to shock people, because 1.75 million, $1,000 per hour, those numbers really just sound crazy. So what is it that you have that lets you get away with charging those rates?
Our minimum project scope is about $15,000, and it's growing. Most of our projects are in the $20,000 to $30,000 range.
How do you charge those prices exactly?
Deliver awesome, high value work that directly turns into an enormous amount of more money for your client, and say no to anything that's outside of your abilities.
So, okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense, but I think people would feel a lot of pressure to charge that much. And, especially at your price points, how are you not afraid of messing something up?
So in the early days, I forced myself to think of Upwork as a game. And the only time that you really get game over is if you break the rules. And so always abide by Upwork's rules, but also make some of my own. And one of those rules is to only accept projects that I could absolutely knock out of the park, and then raise my rate after every single 5-star review until the point where clients just tell me that I'm totally crazy.
Okay, but you did mention, I guess, making mistakes, right? That is a possibility. So what is the biggest mistake that you personally have made?
So I've made a ton of mistakes across the time that I've been on Upwork. Every time I broke my own rules of taking on clients, it always went bad. So one of the other rules is, only work with clients who are a perfect fit, and, always listen to your gut when considering, okay, are you actually a good fit to work together?
So you mentioned having your own set of rules which you follow, and that's awesome, but I'm sure you've made some mistakes in your career. So can you share with us what is the actual biggest mistake that you've made, if you can remember a specific story?
This one time, early on when I was working on Upwork, I took on a client that they just weren't a perfect fit, and I couldn't really put my finger on why. You ever have like one of those situations where you're like, I just don't know what's wrong, but there's something that's off, right? But that person, they said they really want to work together, and so I said, okay, and we get to work. And so I put together the first draft of work, deliver it across to them, all good, no real notes, right? Then deliver the second version of the draft, more progress, but no real input, no real changes from them, small things, but we get it done. So we're almost done. I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, well, the third version, we're going to be ready to rock and roll. We're at the finish line. So we make a couple of changes, deliver the final version, and that's really where the problems started. Clients start sending message after message, and it sort of culminated in something to the effect of, I feel like this is something that I could have gotten for $100 on Craigslist, right? So it was just real not so great things to see, in spite of asking for the feedback all along the way and everything. But ultimately, it was just, I should have been the one to choose clients better. And if you don't really be careful of who you're working with and why you're working with them, then yeah, you're going to have problems on Upwork.
Okay, so there's things you need to look out for, red flags. Could you be a bit more specific on what those red flags actually are?
There are certain things that people do that just throw up the big red flags, and you can tell when something is off if you really look for them very carefully. Just a long laundry list, but the markers that you're going to see are things like when people don't show up. That's if someone doesn't show up to your first meeting, then comes back to you and says, "Oh, I'm sorry that I missed the meeting." That's fine in most other cases. In other jobs, that's going to be okay. But that's a problem when you're on Upwork, because that person might not be cut out for remote work fundamentally. Meetings are important when you do need them. And so unfortunately, I found that if you have people who just cannot make that first meeting with you, then those are the kind of people that will give you bad feedback at the end of a project. Similar sort of scenario when you have someone who shows up late to a meeting, or when they're driving, right? The person who is like dialing in from their cell phone cam while they're behind the wheel of a car. Like, first of all, that's unsafe. Second, kind of irresponsible. Don't do that. But what happens, what that sort of behavior then, pushes towards, is those are the people that end up ghosting you on Upwork. So you end up with starting a project, and, you start working, and you're like, okay, but like, where did you go? Because I haven't heard from you in like 3 or 4 weeks. Are we still doing this thing? And that's not great, because you can then never fully know of what's going on with this project. Beyond that, there's other really clear ones. I'm speaking with other people. Whenever you hear that line of "I'm speaking with other people," that's the kind of person that is probably going to get frustrated in the middle of the project and say, "Yeah, you know what? I'll do it myself," and basically ratchet the work back, pull it back from you, and they don't want to work with you anymore. Then the last one that I would point to is the person who's disorganized. If you ever have somebody who just cannot explain to you exactly what it is that they want and what they need as far as a scope of work, if they can't explain to you, then how are you meant to deliver what it is that they want, right? And so that's the sort of person that gets distracted because they thought they needed A, decide that they need B. They started a contract with you to do A, and you were working on that, but they said, "Oh, but why aren't you giving me B as well?" So that's where things start to really go wrong. Those are just some of the red flags.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I mean, especially the first one, needing to follow up. I mean, even if you're not getting ghosted, if for every little step, especially in the programming world where you have to collect a lot of requirements up front for like specifications and stuff, and if you have to send, I don't know, 10 follow-ups even in that stage, then it just kind of doubles the amount of time you're spending, you know, thinking about it and having to really be on top of them.
Even if you're working on an hourly contract, that ends up being more expensive for the client, but more so it ends up being a headache for you. And ultimately that's not really that great because you're doubling your amount of time that you're putting into a given project. And if you're struggling in the beginning, how do you think that's going to get once you're midway through the project and talking about putting together some really serious stuff for your client? That's where things can really go wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing in programming too is like, let's say you have a Shopify store or some front end site you've built for a client, is generally you're going to have to continue to support that. So that can be almost like a bad relationship you get into and you can't break up as easily. So, well,
you can break up, but it might end up really hurting you in the long term because you get torpedoed with feedback that's less than 5 stars. Yeah, that's really, really painful. Because on Upwork, like there's just a specific thing that if you have a review that is less than 5 stars, then that is going to haunt you for a long time. And that's some of the stuff that I was so happy to get into within the course.
Yeah, so I think this stuff is going to be super valuable, you know, for people who are a bit apprehensive, like knowing where the mines are in the minefield, so to speak. I think we can shift the focus a bit and become a little bit more positive here because I'm sure people are wondering, how can I actually replicate the success component, you know, especially when they're first starting out, right? And their profile doesn't say 5 stars, it doesn't have any stars. And instead of 1.75 million, it says $0. So if someone was starting like from scratch today, what are your top 3 tips for setting up that initial good profile to kind of hit the ground running and then get that first job? Because that's a major mental barrier, I think, for a lot of people.
To get the first job, there's a ton of different things that you can do, but only a couple that really matter. First off, you got to go and look at what the best people out there are doing. Clearly, they have struck a nerve and have touched on something that is working. And so what you want to do is first and foremost, search out other freelancers in your space who are absolutely crushing it and seek to emulate their success. Look for the little markers of what are they doing right that is working because they figured it out. Learn from that. Next, you've got to get testimonials. If you don't have reviews already existing, then you want to use Upwork's testimonial feature to go and collect feedback from people that you've worked with maybe in the past in other roles. And that will do a lot of heavy lifting for you in just showcasing that you know what you're doing and you're active in the space. Then the most important piece of this, you've got to create awesome work examples. Clients need to see what you can do for them. And if you don't have past work, then just pretend that you have a client that's paying you $100,000 to show them something fantastic, mock it up and showcase that.
Okay. So learn by example, aka copy people, get external testimonials if you don't have Upwork reviews, and then fill out your profile completely and make it look like real projects and not just practice whatever projects, I think would be the 3 things.
You can't copy people.
Mentioned. Yeah, at least not for the profile, I guess. Okay, let's say now my profile is done. Like I followed your tips, I followed the tips in Freemote, and I want to start actually sending proposals, which are how I apply for / land jobs on Upwork. So what are your proposal tips? And would you recommend copy and pasting proposals? So sending the same one over and over to save time?
No. Do not copy paste proposals. It just does not work. You can use a template as a guide, but you have to personalize it every single time if you want to win jobs. You have to use the client's first name, and which you can get from looking in their past feedback from other freelancers and other jobs that they've hired for on Upwork. If you have any information about the client's business or industry, then do some quick background research and weave that into your proposal. And also show that you're excited and motivated to work together. So for example, hey, Mike, I saw that you're in the online courses industry, and this is something that I've always been really interested in and would love to explore putting together your lead gen page for this project. For example, something as simple as that shows that one, you are not the person who copy pasted. Two, you like and are engaged in the industry and you know it, even if you haven't worked in it before, but that it's something that you're excited to get into. And the next piece of all of that is, listen, if that doesn't work, you have to experiment with new approaches every step of the way.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about those 3 first tips that you gave is they're very small little things, but they all show, I guess, attention to detail, or they kind of give a little preview of what working with you would be like. So like, even though you're customizing every one, they don't take that much additional time, but they can actually be like the difference between getting it or not.
That's the most critical point of the entire Upwork experience, that initial outreach. Are you going to be the person who gets considered to do the job, or are you going to get your proposal archived by the client and not ever hear back from them? So yeah, that is really the most potent little piece that you can weave in just to stand out a little bit more.
Okay, so I followed all these tips. I want a job, okay? But I really want to blow this client away because I heard what you said earlier. I need 5-star reviews. So how can I make sure I get that 5 stars and hopefully future business, not just from this person, but from other people who see this review?
So you got to back it up a little bit and understand that the getting of the 5-star reviews, that actually happens before you even press accept the job. Now, before you agree to take on any project, you need to give the client a scope of work every single time. And that means spelling out in crystal clear terms what you're doing, what your process is, when they can expect to receive the final work, how much it's going to be, or a rough range of how much it's going to be for them in total, and what you need from them in order to get the job done. And the more crystal clear that you are on that, the easier it is to deliver exactly what's agreed. The biggest problems on Upwork happen when you have a miscommunication or misaligned expectations. Client might expect something huge where you are actually thinking that you're only going to deliver them something small. When you have a clear scope of work, that's out of the question. It's extremely clear of what you have to deliver between you and them before you agree to take on any money or put yourself on the line for a 5-star review or a lower review, either way. And the little secret piece of that is never, ever, ever press the end contract button ever again. You don't touch that button. You only let clients press end contract.
Fair enough. Is there anything else you would add to getting the 5-star?
On Upwork, you always want to bias toward over communicating throughout the project. When you get to the end of the contract, you also have to commit to delivering that 5-star level work. You have to ask for the review and also tell them how important it is. And if for any reason they wouldn't feel confident giving you a 10 out of 10 or 5 stars across the board with a glowing review, then before they press end contract, you want them to reach out to you and say, like, listen, I want to make this right because I want you to have that 5-star experience in working with me. As long as you weave that into what you're doing and always ask for that review and commit to that 5-star result for the client, then yeah, you're going to get the reviews. And the biggest point of them all is that reviews are worth far more than money on Upwork.
Yeah, I got it. And so, I mean, I guess in summary, like setting the expectations, number one, will lead to a client never basically ever being disappointed because they know exactly what they're getting. And then almost over communicating to the point of being like super empathetic rather than the opposite, right? Because the under communicating, I guess, is the thing you want to avoid.
At every point in time, your client should know what you did yesterday, what you're doing today, and what you're going to do tomorrow. As long as that's true throughout the entire project, you're going to have a pretty happy client. And that closeout for the 5-star review is going to be very, very easy.
Awesome. So this has actually been super valuable, Evan. I'm sure people are going to really, really appreciate this advice. With that being said, do you have any other advice for new freelancers that we didn't cover?
For new freelancers, you just got to get started. Understand that there's no failing on Upwork. The only thing that you can do is just keep growing, keep trying something new, keep experimenting, but you've got to get started in order to be able to grow.
Yeah, I'm hoping these tips, and in addition to what we have in Freemo, will give people the confidence to do just that. So that's the hope. Anyway, awesome. So One more question. Where can people hear more from you?
Well, we worked really hard on the 7-figure freelancing tips mini course within Freemote. So I would say that's probably the best place to learn more because it's specifically geared toward programmers and web developers. And I think that if you're serious about taking the next step, becoming a freelancer and building your career and earnings, then that's definitely going to be the best place to go to. Beyond that, you can also find out more about me on my YouTube channel, Freelance MVP, as well as on other socials, Freelance MVP, and on the website, freelancemvp.com.
Awesome. So I think people are going to get a ton of value out of that. Evan, thank you again. And we'll see you guys on future videos as well as inside of Freemote. So catch you later.